Welcome to the 5-7 podcast. I'm your host, Pri, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mike Salinas.
Good evening.
And today we have a law enforcement official with us, and he's going to go by, I don't know, we'll call him something from like the X-Men, like Agent Zero or something like that.
Can dig it.
How you doing?
Good. How are you, Mikey?
Good. How did you survive the polar vortex?
Dude, I didn't. I had a bunch of days off, which was good.
Awesome.
And I wrapped myself up, and I drank a lot of wine and whiskey. So,
yeah, man, I think everybody kind of tried to brave the, just the bitter cold that came through because, I went outside and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna check it out, and it was cold, but I think the body gets to a point where, cold as shit is cold as shit.
Right.
But I noticed, like, I walked back in, dude, like my face was burning, and I'm like, I just went and threw out the trash, my face is like on fire.
Absolutely. It's funny because I woke up and I said, all right, I'm gonna have a cup of coffee, have my eggs, have a protein shake. And then I'm like the little kid looking out the window and I'm like, nope. Should I go to the gym? Should I not go to the gym? I'm like, I don't want to go to the gym. Why? Yeah. So I bundled up and, my car barely started but I made it. I survived.
Cool, man. Cool. Yeah, it was a person that I work with. She didn't know that she had her front door leaks air. Oh, and God. She didn't know that it leaked air like really, really bad apparently. And She says that her thermostat said that it was 52 in her place.
Oh my God. She's lucky the freaking pipes didn't explode and she didn't have Jack Frost sitting next to her.
Just hanging out, just sitting there.
Yeah, like, right?
What's up?
Crazy.
We talked about Jack Frost in a previous podcast. There was one with like Michael Keaton. It's like a wholesome one, and then there's one with like I don't know who's in it, man. But it's like a horror movie. It's actually kind of funny.
It's the guy. Well, there's the horror movie one. There's that one, and then you have the one with the guy from Home Improvement. Tim Allen.
Right.
The Santa Claus is what it was. That's what it was.
Yeah, he's talking about the one like it's like a porn version of Jack Frost, and it is
it's not porn, dude.
It is messed up. This was the crap we used to watch when we were younger. It's bad, man.
Hey, man, I'm not even going to question that. I'm not even going to hit that note.
So what made you want to get into law enforcement? Like, was there like a life experience? Is there, did you watch Cobra and you're like, yeah, that's what I want to be? Like, what was it?
Well, man, to be honest with you, I mean, we all, the three of us kind of grew up in the same circumstance / like same area, right? And for me personally, my uncle and my aunt, they lived directly across the street from me growing up. And, they were both heavily involved in gangs. And I was there literally like, in a 24-hour period, I used to hang out at my grandma's house, probably, 12 hours out of that 24-hour day. Right. So half the day. So I saw everything, at a real young, early, impressionable age where I saw my grandmother, my uncles, my cousins, everybody kind of going through the chaos of what gang life and what the criminal life and what it does to the family from the inside out. I mean, I literally lived it. So at an early age, for me personally, I always asked myself, how do I break this cycle? How do I stop this from happening to another family? And for me, it was always like, should I be a lawyer? Do I need to fight? Because when you're young and you see the police arresting a family member and you see the police responding to kind of your environment, you think at an early age that it's the police, that it's, they're just messing with your family, or they're just doing something to kind of stick it to you because you don't know the whole story. You don't know what's actually happening outside of that picture. So your family and you growing up, you only think that that it's everybody else. Like, you know, it's not my uncle, it's not my aunt, it's not the gang life, it's not the other people. It's, you know, these gang members that used to come to my uncle's house, you know, although good people, they, you know, in front of us, they were doing things outside of that experience with us, that, you know, that 20-minute experience that we had with them, that was probably hurting other people's lives, other families. Right. So early on, I wanted to be a lawyer because I thought I will never allow, you know, how do I help my family get through these kinds of situations? How do I make life easier for them against, you know, law enforcement? How do I protect them? Right. That was my way of thinking at an early age. And then as I started growing up and I started to understand and see what exactly was happening, I started realizing that it's not, you know, I mean, in some cases, it is, you know, a bad situation where somebody is getting picked on, you know, in the community or whatever it may be. But in most cases, you know, when you fall into gangs, when you fall in the hands of gangs, or you fall in the hands of the life of crime in general, you know, these are all life choices. Now, I say that, you know, kind of, you know, I don't want a bunch of people to crucify me and say, oh, you know, you know, it's not always life choices, because it's not. Sometimes the environment in which we grow up in, some people don't have that choice, right? But the people that I've grown up with, the people that I know, my experience, I would say it's, you know, at least 60 to 70% of those people made that choice. That's just from my life experience. I can't speak on everybody. So, you know, anybody who's listening, don't think that I'm saying that I don't understand that it's not always a life choice. But in my experience, from my family and my people that I grew up, it was a life choice. And, you know, I grew up in a very healthy home in the aspect of love and positive relationships and positivity. So I don't know, you know, that kind of pushed me to want to stop it. It made me want to do something to stop others from falling into that life. So when I became a police officer, one of the things that people always questioned me about was like, you know, why do you spend so much time talking to these kids? And, you know, what do you see that I don't see? You know, because I see this kid and, you know, I see a kid that doesn't have a chance. But with you speak to these guys, you're firm, you know, like that was the thing for me on the street, was always, you know, being real as possible with anybody and everybody, treating everybody the same, being real, but at the same time, having a moment of empathy, right? That's what a lot of guys forget in this line of work, is empathy. And the longer you do the job, the harder it is to sustain empathy, because it's always the same thing over and over again. It's like a vicious cycle. And you have to reboot your mind, like you, Mike. I mean, you were in the military. You kind of know how important it is to reboot your brain and reboot your cycles, because if you don't, you fall into this habit of thinking that everybody's the same, every life is the same, every crime is the same, right? And it's not. You have to take it on a case by case basis. And I think in this line of work, it gets harder and harder to do that with some of the negativity, some of the things that you encounter on the street, some of the bad apples, you know, on either side, you know, whether it's the media, whether it's a parent, whether it's a gang member, whether it's somebody who, you know, just ran a red light. Sometimes it just, you know, it's hard to do that. Right. So to kind of, to go back to what I was saying, I'm kind of getting off on this rant here.
It's fine.
What started me in law enforcement was just, you know, making a difference, being not falling into the same trap that many of my own family members fell into. And it didn't just, you know, it wasn't just law enforcement though. It was drugs. You know, I never, you know, I just, none of that stuff ever appealed to me. Drinking. I mean, I didn't have my first drink for the most part till I was 20 years old. None of those things really appealed to me. I just was never that kind of guy. And sports played a huge role in my life. That's another thing that kind of pushed me in the direction to just try and be better than some of the people that I grew up with and some of the family members that I had. But that's really what pushed me is sports and just trying to be better. That's really what pushed me into law enforcement, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's I think that everyone's peers, they definitely play a role, because when I was going into the military, everybody was going to college. Everybody was
Correct.
going away to college, and it's like, is that what I'm supposed to be doing? Because it's like, because when I got out of high school, dude, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was
Right.
like, well, I don't know. I think I'm going to work for a while. And I did that. And then I had my first winter working outside, and I was like, oh, no, I'm not doing this the rest of my
Right.
life. There's no way. And then 9/11 happened. And then I entered the military because I'm like, you know what? I'm young, and it's time to do something, And I went from the pan to the fire with that, but I could totally understand, where you're coming from, and especially when kids get involved, because you want them to see that it's like, hey, you can make it. Everybody can make a difference. It's just like, you can't just blanket statement everybody. Like all cops
Sure.
are bad. That's not
Correct.
true, because there are a lot of good cops out there.
Correct.
And you can't say that all people of this demographic are bad. That's not
Correct.
true. Like everybody has.
And it's funny because that's one of the things that it's an interesting topic, because I always, when I was working on the street and when I was working in law enforcement in that capacity, you tend to speak to people, and they're like, well, cops are bad this way, or they would pull their kids aside and say, don't look at that, or if they were misbehaving, their 2-year-old was misbehaving, we're grabbing a sandwich. And one of the big things that happens is, somebody grab their child and say, if you don't behave, that I'm going to have him take you away. And I would say, ma'am, or, young man, I'm not taking you to jail, because you're not, you're misbehaving in Subway. Right.
Yeah.
You just you want to get away from that. You want to,
Yeah.
you have bad dentists, you have bad lawyers, you have bad baggers that bag your grocery. If you go to the grocery store and you get this guy that keeps giving you messed up bags, you're like, I'm not going to that line anymore. I'm going to go to the other guy because he bags my groceries right.
God forbid you get a millennial who doesn't want to do his job,
Right. It's the same thing, and people, unfortunately, because of media and because it sells news and newspapers and things of that nature, it gets likes on somebody's Facebook page or their Twitter page. It's good to promote this this narrative that law enforcement is really only out there to do bad things, unfortunately, and that's something that I think history has not always favored law enforcement, and there are things that we all can work on as people, as officers, but again, there are things that we can work on as a society in law. There are things that we can work out in politics. There are things that we can be better at in just everyday being good people, right? I mean, helping your neighbor, just being a better neighbor. I mean, all of these things are relevant. It's just not. But unfortunately, it just kind of, you get pinned in a corner when it comes to law enforcement.
Would you say the academy prepared you for like the everyday, being on the job every day? Do you think that it prepared you, fitness wise? Do you think it prepared you for situations that you ran into?
Oh God, man. So my situation is different. Everybody's experience is different. And everybody's upbringing is different, right? So growing up, again, where I grew up, I feel like, for me personally, the academy didn't necessarily prepare me for, what the job entails, because what the job entails is exactly what I grew up in. I grew up, growing up in East Chicago and growing up, with my family being involved in a lot of the things that they were in at that time, growing up as a young guy. Kind of watching that and knowing how people are, I grew up street smart. So I think everybody, I mean, Pri, I mean, I didn't grow up book smart. I was always
Neither did I.
I was always the guy that was, basketball, sports, and girls was that's kind of what drove me at an early age.
Amen.
So I wasn't always I wasn't always book smart, but I was always street smart. So for me in the academy, what I will say is that as far as preparing me for the job on the street, you get squared away on your law. That's the most important. So you understand the law. And I was very fortunate enough to have a very, very thorough and good academy experience when it came to the law portion of it. So in the aspect of knowing the law, which is, is one of the most important, if not the most important, because you got to know what you're doing. Everything else was pretty much you learn on the job, man, in the aspect of real life situations. There's no class, there's no book, there's no recipe to when you respond to a hot call. You have to experience that. You have to know how to deal with people. You have to know how to speak to people. I mean, a lot of this job is communication. And I can't tell you how many times I went to just things that were shit, calls that were destined to be shit. And you get there and you're on your way and you're thinking this shit's going to hit the fan. It's going to be a terrible situation. And then you speak to people just like you and I are talking right now. I can't tell you how many times somebody was on 50 and I got there hyped up, but I brought my communication to exactly how you and I are talking right now. And when I did that, when I came to the party speaking like a reasonable person, 90% of the time, and that's not all the time, but 90% of the time, I was able to diffuse the situation because of just the way I was able to talk to people. And you don't learn that in the academy. You can't. It's impossible. So, the academy is good for prepping you to understand what is on the horizon. Mm-hmm. But until you get boots on the ground and you're out there dealing with these situations, you can't. The academy is great. It's a very awesome experience. It's good for building camaraderie and kind of knowing, networking through law enforcement and kind of learning that cycle and disciplining you enough to know, hey, do I want to do this? Is this really what I want to do? Through your 16 weeks or your 20 weeks. But when you get out there, it's trial by fire, brother. Yeah. So the academy, it's great. It was a great experience. It definitely got me, again, my situation was different. So when I got to the academy, I was already I was up to speed and I was really in tune with my body. I was really, working out was a part of my life at that point. So getting there and doing the physical daily grind of PTing and things of that nature, it really didn't, it was good to get you on a system and stuff like that, kind of like you in the military. As far as kind of the PT portion of it, I was already really in tune with my body. So I can't really say that it pushed me one or the other, right? Not so much challenging. I mean, it's definitely challenging because somebody can smoke you for 3 hours just doing push-ups and it's challenging, right? You can be the most physically fit man in the world. So I don't want to sound like I'm egomaniac or anything like that, but because believe me, there were hard days. But as far as how many days after the academy are you going to sit there and, roast yourself doing 500 push-ups, right? It's not going to happen. Yeah. So it gets you prepared. It's a good slap on the rear end to say, hey, you're going to do this or you're not. What are you going to do? You're going to shit or get off the pot.
Yeah, it's a good idea, for guys just in general. I think it's important to stay in shape, especially I would imagine going into the academy, you would want some kind of, at least a decent base of good functional fitness, Yeah.
I mean, the one thing that is the true test is, again, like One of the things that's so interesting is that when I went to the academy, when I started going, was at like the height, because I worked in corrections and I worked in, and then I worked in law enforcement, obviously. But one of the things that was really at the height of its, it was like at the peak of its interest was jujitsu, right? Mm-hmm. So when I was going through the academy, everybody was a jujitsu master. I'm a green belt. I'm a super purple belt. And I know how to do this and I can do that. And, when we were doing, Red Man, I've been training here for 15 years and blah, 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 blah. And some of those same guys, again, you can roll around on a mat and you can do all of these things. And there are several guys, again, I'm not dissing the jujitsu world or anything like that. I'm just saying, at that time of my experience, there were many posers saying that they were jujitsu masters. And when we got out on the street, they couldn't, fight their way out of a paper bag.
Yeah.
Again, real life is different. And everybody will tell you that they were born in the street. They're street smart. They're this and they're that and they're this and they're that. You can hear this from me and some guy you talk to on the street, like, he didn't know what he was talking about. He's this, he's that. So in that aspect, again, when the rubber meets the road, that's when you find out what your true colors are, what that person next to you, their true colors are.
Everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face,
Right. That's so true.
I'm sure a lot of guys want to use their moves, and I think jiu-jitsu is definitely a good skill to have, but it shouldn't be the only skill you have, because if you're in a stand-up fight with somebody, jiu-jitsu is fucking worthless. You know, I mean, yeah, sure, you could try and take somebody to the ground, but like, what if it doesn't work?
Correct.
I mean, just at that moment,
Right, and it's all every scenario is different. Every jujitsu guy is different. Maybe, one guy can get themselves out of the scenario because they're very well-rounded in fighting and ground fighting and things of that nature. So by no stretch of the imagination, and again, make sure you quote me on this. I'm not bashing that world by no stretch, because there are some bad motherfuckers out there, and there are some bad boys that would, my partner on the street would wear my ass out, 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. I mean, he's just a bad dude when it comes to fighting that way, right? Yeah. But there are some posers out there.
So why don't you give us a couple examples of a few calls that you've been on?
God, dude. So it's funny. I saw that question, and I was expecting it. And dude, like they're not specific calls, right? There aren't any specific calls that really come to mind when it comes to my experience. And I say that because every experience was different. Every experience, every call was important. For me personally, when I see that question, it's not so much the calls, it's all the calls. That's what makes you, the kind of police officer that you want to be. It's all the calls magnified into one single moment. There's so many things that I've experienced, from working in the jail to being on the street to what I'm doing now, that it's hard for me to sum up specific calls that really come to mind, dude. Like, there are so many, and my partner and I used to talk about this all the time midway through our career. Like, hey man, we should really be writing this stuff down, because if we talked about it, nobody would ever believe it. But it's when you go to that call where a young father worked midnights the night before, and this happened to me early in my career, where you respond to a call because his child is unresponsive, is relatively newborn, mom's at work. We get there, the child is obviously unfortunately passed away. So the mom and dad they were a young couple. They had a system that was down, and mom would work days. At night, dad would go to work. So mom goes to work days. Dad comes home from work at midnights. And he's just, he falls asleep with the baby, and unfortunately the baby rolled over, wedged in the bed, and he or she passed out. I don't remember if it was a boy or a girl, but when you go there and you see that, and you see the devastation on someone's face, again, I go back to the term empathy that I used earlier in this interview. There are no words, there are no feelings, there's nothing in the academy, there is nothing in life that can prepare you for that. Yeah. And being the person to respond to that, what do you say? What do you say to that guy who's just trying to get his life together, who's just trying to make ends meet, mom and dad have a system going, she works, he works. What do you do? What do you say? There's nothing you can do or say other than be there, try and guide that person through that. And you leave there and I'll never forget it. I was always the kind of guy that I didn't talk to my wife and we don't really talk. I don't bring work home. I don't really talk about work. I don't talk about experiences unless they're, I try and keep them light. So if they're funny, like I'll talk about them, right? I'll bring them up. And my partner and I, back when we were working, it was like, dude, some of the stuff that we experienced, you just can't talk about it. It's some funny times. So like, calls like that, Mike, those are the calls that stick out more to me than anything, because I've been involved in pursuits. I've been involved in foot chases. I've been involved in fights. I've been involved in kind of a little bit of everything. I was fortunate enough to kind of be thrown into the fire and kind of deal with it all. But those things, man, when it comes to family, when it comes to children, when it comes to abuse of children, those kinds of things, man. And it's depressing as shit to sit here and talk about it. But that's the real stuff. That's the real stuff. That's the stuff that, they don't, all these people who watch, these SIUs and all this crap that they watch on TNT and all these other shows, that they think that this is what law enforcement is all about. And, that's good for, to motivate you to think that, a lot of these guys, they go to the academy, or girls for that matter, and I want to work in, I'm going to be a detective. I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that. Yeah. Well, you better make your bones on the street first, because that's where it's all at. That's where it's at. That's where you make your bones, is working in the street every day. I'm sitting here talking like I'm some badass, and dude, I try and be as humble as possible. So by no stretch of the imagination, there are guys that are working the street right now that are much better men, much better police officers, much better everything than I will ever be. I can only speak from my personal experience and some of the things that I've seen and done. Make sure that's noted, because there are some great men and women that I worked with that will be, I could never be half the police officer or detective or anything that they were. They're just fantastic people. But I got to tell you, man, there's not one specific call that really sticks out to me outside of those experiences dealing with, those calls are just, they stick in your brain forever.
So when you're packing in for the day, how do you turn yourself off so that when you walk through the door, you're kind of receptive to your family?
It's kind of wild, man, because it's hard. You don't necessarily turn it off. You, depending on what your home life is like. Again, everybody's situation is different, and my outlet has always been, sports or exercise. And I was fortunate enough to marry a woman who, she doesn't nag me. She doesn't bother me. If I don't want to talk about something, I don't talk about it. And I'll never forget that specific situation. I'm not a guy I'm just not a communicator in that aspect. I kind of shut myself down from that. I shut my family out of that because they don't need to know that. But that I'll never forget it. That specific situation, I had to have somebody to talk to. And, I spoke to my wife. I came home and I immediately said, I got to talk to you. This is kind of what happened, and this is what's going on. And this is what's going on. And I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know, what to do. And she listened to me. She didn't say anything. She didn't communicate anything back. She just listened. And that's all I needed, man. I just needed somebody to kind of listen. So for me personally, decompression, for the most part, with those kinds of scenarios, always involved talking to my wife and exercise, to be quite honest with you. That's the long end of that story, I suppose.
Yeah, exercise is a great stress reliever. So working in the gang unit, how would you say like progress is being made from, these guys that are running around, kind of lawless in a way?
Man, progress is made every day, every second. Progress is in the eye of the beholder, right? Because unfortunately, there will always be that element in crime in this world. There will always be the gang element, and they will always prey on the people who are mentally weak in that aspect, and who don't have the home life that I wish everybody could have. The boots on the ground answer is that every day progress was made, but the realistic answer is that there will always be, and I call them predators at this point. There will always be predators in the gang world that will prey on kids, on men, on women, on anybody and everybody who is not strong enough or lost in their life at a moment, or weak at a moment, and they will prey on those people. And once they can sink their teeth into those unfortunate, men, women, children, whatever, they just kind of run with them, dude. So it's a tough battle. I'd like to say we're winning, but I would never be able to give you a true statistic or a true answer to that, because I could tell you statistically we're winning, but when I see some of these kids running around on the street, sometimes you lose hope. And gangs aren't like they used to when we were growing up. I wouldn't even call them gangs at this point. They're crews. They're young kids that are lost, that now there's 25 different street crews in a school. When we were growing up, you had your GDs and your vice lords and kings, and you had your traditional Midwest gangs. So it's crazy. It's like one thug, two cups now, right? Like those are the kind of crews that we have forming around here. But like, these kids are buying into it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, but you're fighting like 15 different crews, at one time. So like, this crew is fighting some other crew of 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds. So there's no real, like, how do you solve that? How do you, and the advancement of social media now is just so crazy that, like, when we were growing up, beefs of, like, if somebody made fun of you at a school function, or you ran into somebody you had a fight with somebody at a basketball game, right? You didn't confront that person again to freaking like 50 days later, because no one had a car. You couldn't see that person. Maybe you talked to him on the phone and you guys had a dispute on the phone, but outside of that, it was like, it was done. By the time you saw each other again 50 days later, 2 months later, whatever it was over and done with. Now you have these kids that are constantly Snapchatting each other, drama, talking shit, and just like rubbing it in somebody's face that, oh, I beat you on the basketball court. You're a bum. You're this, you're that. How do you combat that? Right. And this goes to the, like, one of the things in general with like the whole bullying thing in today's society. And like, I attribute a lot of the things that's happening with kids, with the younger generation. And I sound like an old man. I'm only, I'm still relatively young.
We're just getting started, dude.
A lot of what I attribute to what's going on in today's society is the quick access to bash another kid. So like, you could, if some kid has a bad day, their bad day started at 9 a.m. every kid from every different neighborhood across East Chicago, Gary, Chicago, California, everywhere will know about it by lunchtime, because some asshole kid is going to post it on Facebook that this kid, he spilled a milkshake on his shirt. That bothers people. Like, that might be something that actually ruins somebody's day or month or whatever it may be. Maybe somebody was on a high. This kid was on such a high. All of a sudden he spills a milkshake on himself, and the whole world is talking about it by 12 o'clock in the afternoon, because somebody posted it and shared it, and that got shared by somebody who doesn't know, and that person shared it. And dude, it's almost like a cancer. How do you that? How does law enforcement can't? We can't. You can't. It's almost impenetrable. You can't. Social media is it's so beneficial, but it is so bad. It is so bad what it's doing to some of these kids in these areas. But it kind of goes back to when we were growing up. They say video games. Video games will make this kid violent.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat. Oh my God, have you seen this Mortal Kombat?
I played a lot of video games in my day, and I can't say that I ever wanted to freaking throw a chainsaw at somebody.
Or a sombrero. I mean, Jesus Christ, Kung Lao. Right? I mean, who has a sombrero like that?
Exactly. So.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how fast things can go south being a kid these days. Like you said, this kid spills a milkshake on himself, and naturally he does it right next to the chick he's got a crush on or something. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So it's and
I tell you what, if it wasn't done in front of that chick, she knows about it by 11 o'clock because everybody posted it, and she's like, man, I was digging that dude, and now he's a dweeb, but I'm not going to dig him anymore because all these people are sharing it on Facebook, right? So I can't be seen at McDonald's buying a milkshake with this guy because he just threw his milkshake all over himself, 5 hours ago. No.
Yeah. And even worse, I think he's probably getting body shamed by other people for drinking that milkshake in the first place.
Exactly. Like, was it organic? Oh my God, he was actually using real milk. Are you kidding me?
That wasn't an avocado milkshake. How dare him?
Exactly. So it's an interesting situation, man. Again, I kind of got off the beaten path on your question, to kind of circle back to your thing as far as like, how are we doing on the war on gangs, I guess, so to speak. I'd like to say we're winning, but time will tell.
Okay. How's your fitness doing, man? What are you doing these days?
Fitness is great, dude. So I'm probably running about, I don't know, like 11 to 12 miles a week. And then, obviously heavy cardio and just in my 20s and in my early 30s, I was real big on just lifting. I'm going to be this bad dude. I'm going to, gain all this muscle. And I did put on a lot of weight. I kind of fluctuated between the CrossFit world in my 20s and early 30s into just lifting. And then at 30, I still wanted to play basketball. Like, my thing was like, I'm still going to ball. I'm still going to play ball. And I was able to do that through my 20s and then early 30s. And then at 34 is when the first major injury of my life happened, which was the Achilles tear. And I tore my Achilles at 34. And dude, it was a coming to Jesus moment, dude. It was like, all right, dude, like we're gonna have to reevaluate life and reevaluate what you can and can't do. So once I rehabbed from that, I kind of switched my workouts to more circuit training. So heavy. I'm still doing. I'm still lifting. Your traditional lifting styles, but I'm doing it, relatively low weight, more like body weight and high reps, and I'm doing that like 3 days a week. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday is usually my weightlifting days. And then everything in between is cardio. One of the things, the circuits that I kind of threw into my daily workouts is rowing. Like, I had to row because I run for a long time. So I was rowing. So my big thing is like doing like 4,000 meter rows, but 500 meters. So every 500 meters, I jump off the row and I'll knock out 30 to 40 push-ups and get back on, and then do 500 meters. And I do that for about, depending on the day. Like some days it'll be 3,000 meters. Some days when I'm really motivated, it'll be 4,000 meters. It just kind of depends on the day. But I just, cardio now at my, being 36 years old, I'll be 37 this year. Cardiovascular is probably more important at this point in my life than really weightlifting. Cause now I've got children and a wife. I can just use the dad bod excuse as long as I can rock it out.
If you're doing cardio, you're good to go, man. Actually, I do the rower a lot too. I like to jump on the rower. I'll do my workout and then I'll jump on the rower again to kind of cap it off. Kind of a race to 1,000 meters, or something like that. Right. But it's I actually, dude, I do cardio before like every single workout that I do, just to like get my heart going, get my muscles kind of warmed up in a bit. Because we are 36 now, and it's important to to get everything loosened up, man. And actually, recently I started doing yoga, and it's really helped with mobility. Have you ever tried it? Have you tried it yet?
I have. So I've done some yoga. I like, dude, and now I have to wake up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to get to the gym, to be at work. And then I'm out, depending on my day, if I don't go, like, it's one of those, it's that saying that goes like, if you don't get your shit done early in the morning, then you're screwing yourself, because by 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, even if your day isn't crazy busy, you drive through traffic, you get home by 7, you're like, dude, I'm not going to the gym. So now it's like, get it out of the way early in the morning. Right. Yeah. So if I don't get it done in the morning, dude, I'm like cashed out, and then, home, you want to see your family, your kids and stuff like that. So, yeah.
How about your diet, man? How do you keep your diet going, considering you're so busy and you're on the go and you don't know what kind of hours you're going to be working? How do you keep it in line?
Meal prep is key to life at this point. Just like with just being busy in general, meal prep is key. That's what I do. So like the one thing for certain is I wake up, I'll have a protein shake, and I'll have like 3 or 4 eggs. That's like every day. Like at this point, eggs taste like, oh God, it's like, why do I even do it? But the days that I don't do it, I'm like dying. So typically, it's protein early in the morning, or a carb of some sort, oatmeal, like your traditional meal for breakfast. And then I snack pretty much all day. If I don't meal prep, then I'm doing fruits and vegetables through the course of the day. And of course, I'm not perfect. I'm not, Rocky Balboa. I mean, I still eat trash, on days that I can. I mean, and I, like I was just talking to somebody last night, you pay to play. So if I'm going to eat a bunch of tacos or I'm going to eat a bunch of trash, like this weekend, dude, I've been on Fat Island, no doubt about it. Just pizza. I had pizza all night yesterday. I drank a freaking half gallon of, or half a 2 liter of Dr. Pepper all by myself.
Holy shit.
But, it's like,
we're going to have to call a medic for you in a little bit after this podcast, dude.
It's crazy because when I like nibble, and then some days I just fall off the wagon. I'm like, Dr. Pepper. Yeah. So like, just snacking, dude. If I don't meal prep, then I'm snacking through the course of the day. I'm eating fruits, vegetables, nuts. I'll pack a protein shake. I'll pack salads and stuff like that. Again, not perfect. I eat trash, a lot, but for the most part, I think my intake as far as good calories and good health is way higher than the trash that I eat. I limit myself to maybe 1 or 2 days of eating like crap, and then I'm good. So,
do you have any advice for, say, like an 18-year-old kid who's, he's not sure what he wants to do. He wants to do something in law enforcement. And do you have any advice for those kids?
Absolutely, man. The number one thing is that, dude, and this is, I can attest to this, and I'm so happy you asked this question. I remember there were things and I was thinking about this the other day. There are moments in my life in high school that I remember people like looking at me and like, what the hell are you doing? And I was never in trouble, or like I wasn't a bad kid, but I just didn't want to do schoolwork. I didn't want to study. I didn't want to, I always did things the hard way. Like, I don't really have to study today. I'll study tomorrow. But I barely passed, but I passed, motherfuckers. And that was like, that was my motto, like as life, early on. But I remember people looking at me like, you have so much potential, you have this, and I didn't see it. And I look back now because of this, the way that I look at kids who don't see that within themselves early on. My thing is, I knew it was there. I was an arrogant little bastard, but I just didn't know how to do it. Right. I didn't know how to put it all together. And it took me a long time to do that. But the one thing that I always did, the one thing that was always true to form, and I attribute this to my mom, because I was afraid to death of her. Like, there were two things that I was afraid of. I was afraid of getting my ass whooped in front of anybody and everybody, and she would do it. I mean, it didn't matter how old I was. And the other thing was fear of failing my mother. My mom was a single mom who put me through private school my whole life. She worked in Chicago to make sure that I didn't go to public schooling. I was an only child. She paid for my college. I mean, dude, when I went to college, I didn't have to work. They sent me $200 every 2 weeks. All I want you to do is graduate. I'll never forget it. So what I would tell an 18-year-old is, the decisions you make will affect you the rest of your life. You can skate the line. You can play the game. You can experience life. You can do those things, but always remember that the decisions that you make can ultimately affect your life forever. So, that night that your friends stole their parents' car and you said, no, I don't want to, I'm not going to get in that car with you guys, because I know it's 3:00 in the morning. You're driving around in your parents' stolen car. If we get stopped, I'm going to get screwed. Things can turn on a drop of a dime, and the decisions you make can affect your future forever. And when you're trying to get in law enforcement and you're trying to go beyond law enforcement to work into higher positions when it comes to the law enforcement realm, because it's not just police work, you have, federal jobs and things like that. The decisions that you make at 18 and 19 years old can affect you forever. So always just, I was always that guy that I was still afraid to get in trouble, even though I'm not going to get in trouble. Yeah, blah. I would do it in the back of my mind. I was like, shit, if I get in trouble, the shit's going to hit the fan. I could lose this. I could lose that. But most importantly, I could let my mom down. I don't want to be a statistic. I didn't, you say what you will, and times have changed a little bit, but I'm a Hispanic guy, I'm Puerto Rican, Black, and Mexican, so I'm a multi-race, more than multi-race, but I'm like Tiger Woods of law enforcement. But it's like, you say what you will, but the facts are the facts, like, to be here in this position, it is not always the case for people like us. So you have to work extra hard to get out of that. And once you get out of it, you're good. Like, I've never been judged because of who I am or the way that I carry myself or whatever. But you better believe that if I didn't make it to where I'm at, I would probably be prejudged right out the gate, because I wouldn't know any better.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. The decisions you make now, that's the best advice I can give anybody trying to get into law enforcement at 18 years old, 19 years old. The decisions you make now, I guarantee you, whether it's a security clearance or whether it's a background check or something, it could come up.
Yeah.
So the decisions you make now, man, could affect you for the rest of your life. It sounds so cliche, but specifically when it comes to law enforcement, it can ruin your life.
We're very appreciative of you coming on the podcast and sharing your your wisdom of being on the job for such a long time, and we're very appreciative of your service to your community and holding the line. And we wanted to let you know that, man. and stay safe out there, and thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it, guys. You guys are keep doing your thing, bro. I completely support it. I think it's good to see you guys grind this out, dude. I think it's only going to get better for you guys. Keep up the good work, bro.
I appreciate that. Thanks. So that's it for tonight, guys. This is Pre and Mike out.